Woodward, ROE, of Ransom Fidelity Company, 702 Michigan National Tower, Lansing, Michigan, 48933, phone 517-482-1538, on Wednesday, July 3rd, 1991, and Helen Earley of the Oldsmobile History Center at EDC North, 4000 North Grand River in Lansing, Michigan. Well, I think we're all set. Woody, if you'd like to tell us who you are, we'll start our interview.
All right. I'm Woody Rowe, and my business address is 702 Michigan National Tower, Lansing. The phone is 482-1538. I'm a son of Clarence and Bernice Rowe, a grandson of Ransom and Meta Olds, and I've lived in Lansing my whole life.
Okay, what is your position in the Olds family right now? You manage what?
I'm retired for 5 years, so I did work for both the Ransom Fidelity Company, which is the foundation, for many years, and also for the REOs Company for many years.
What is the REOs Company?
Well, that is sort of, that was a corporation that sort of managed the affairs of the family. Actually, it itself was owned real estate, and was, but they, through the REOs Company, the accounts and things of the various members of the family were handled. And that, I guess, that has changed now, of course, and it doesn't do that. That's a company that really, I guess, Olds Anderson probably explained to you, he's president of it now, yes, which I was a number of years ago. And also the Ransom Fidelity Company has been changed. It isn't the same as it was. It has been sort of divided up, and the current Ransom Fidelity Company is managed and run is Olds Anderson's responsibility.
I see. Okay. Somebody was mentioning the other day of a Lansing Oldsmobile company that was on the letterhead, early 1940 letterhead of Rio, I think it was.
Well, the Lansing Oldsmobile Company is a forerunner of Story Oldsmobile and Trebling Oldsmobile. It was a local agent, car agency here in Lansing, and it was down on Grand, let's see, no, not Grand, Capitol, and let's see where the present court, circuit court is. And that was the agency. It was owned by 4 men in town, I believe. There was Ransom Olds. I think he owned, I think, a quarter, and then he bought out Bruce Anderson, his son-in-law, so he owned a half of it. The other quarter was owned by F.N. Arbaugh, and well, I'll have to think of just a minute. Jim Van Kuren owned the other quarter, I believe it was. He is a family, and I can't remember what Jim did. He was an older man, but well, it'll come to me maybe, but I forget some of those. That goes way back. He died quite a few years ago, and as of course did Mr. Harbaugh. But it was just it was a car agency. That's all it was. And of course there was always a little confusion, I think, between Oldsmobile and that, but they had the name and they used it, and then it ceased being the Lansing Oldsmobile Company. Stayed in existence until a few years ago as the owner of the real estate. And Trebling Oldsmobile leased the real estate, and then when Story bought out Trebling, he leased the real estate until he moved out on Michigan Avenue, where he is now. But so that's the setup that was Lansing Olds. It was confusing. for the local for GM or Oldsmobile because they were the name. It sounded like as if that was the corporate name.
Letter. The Ariel's Museum said a lady had brought it in, and on the letterhead it said Ariel's Company, Lansing Oldsmobile Company, and Olds Hotel Corporation. But those three names of businesses appeared on the same letterhead.
Well, they were all that I'd never seen that particular letterhead, but they all were. There was an interest from Mr. Olds and all of them. I believe that's why, because of the hotel, there was he was interested in both the operating, and there were two hotels. There was a community hotel corporation, which owned the real estate. And then there was a Hotel Olds operating company that operated the hotel. And Bruce Anderson was the major owner and controller of that, I believe. And of course, he ran the hotel as such. But I was involved with the Lansing Community Hotel Corporation as the real estate part of it, as were a lot of other people. That they're the ones that put the money up and got the thing going way back when. It was a community project, and lots of people put money into it.
Names were in that community project then.
That particular Lansing Community Hotel Corporation was just, I think it was just a corporation set up many, many years ago when they built it back in the 20s, or I don't know when it was built, to build it and own the real estate. And then the operating company was formed to manage and run and they paid them rent. And so, and leased the building from them. I can't remember the exact arrangement now with it, but that was and then of course it was all sold to the Jack Tar chain of Houston, Texas.
20s, I think the Hotel Olds came into existence.
Probably, yeah, I would assume that's it. And it was in the early 50s when a Jack Tar organization of, well, I guess he was Mr. Salmons was the man who was an insurance man. It was the money behind it, and he owned the Jack Tar chain, and they bought the hotel, as they did the Fort Harrison Hotel eventually in Florida, which was sold from our office. That's in Clearwater. The Fort Harrison Hotel was well, it's now the Church of Scientology. You've heard that. That's one of their headquarters now. They were purchased from, I don't know who, and probably some interim ownership in between. I'm not familiar, but in the 50s, either that was sold in the 50s, and I'm not sure about the community hotel when that was sold. That may have been in the 60s, but
so there were a number of hotels in this community hotel organization.
No, that had nothing to do with it. No, I'm saying I just brought that in. It was the Lansing Community Hotel Corporation was just owned the real estate that you now know was the hotel, and now is owned by the state.
Okay.
And there was nothing. It was called community because I believe that there was many people involved in the community put money invested in it, and that was the reasons why it was so named, I believe, for my time, of course. But.
Sure. Yes. Well, then in 28, I believe the Olds Tower was built. I think it was occupying 29, 30.
I think the date is about 1930 on the cornerstone there. I'm not sure, but I believe that is, and that was the.
That was quite a building for that time.
Oh yeah, it was a tall building, and I guess they had to get. I'm not sure whether they had to get special dispensation for the height or not. I don't know, but anyway, it was a tall building.
I mean, yes, it did the Depression there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he wanted to have a building, I guess, and so he built it, and I guess and then of course it was Capital National Bank was the main tenant. In fact, I think it was called the Capital National Bank Tower at first. And then they decided to change it and call it the Olds Tower. And then, of course, in There again, I can't remember the date when it was sold, but I think it was in the 50s or, yeah, late 50s when the Michigan National Bank purchased it from the Ariels Company. And that was owned by the Ariels Company, the tower.
What are your first recollections of your grandfather?
Well, probably family gatherings way back in the 20s. Well, he was always there, and he was obviously the type of man he was. He was sort of he was a very dominant man, but he, as my relationship has always been just fine with him. He was there. We'd visit him quite a bit, and of course. Well, he was living at 720 South Washington, which incidentally that's where I was born. So in those days, at least my mother didn't go to the hospital. So and we always spent, of course, my recollections. You always had to go on holidays. We always had Christmas dinner with the Olds family, all of us, the Andersons, the Rose, and they included my grandfather and grandmother Rowe, who were good friends of the Oldses. So they were included, and they were the only other part of the family. So the whole family got together for dinner for every Christmas, and we had our own Christmas first. Then we go over there at our own home, and then everybody gathered at the there for Christmas and New Year's. Well, our grandparents Rose took over, and he was president of the American State Savings Bank, and they took over and always had New Year's dinner there, and Thanksgiving we either went to the Rose or the Andersons.
So actually, your family was pretty family oriented.
Well, very much so. Oh yeah, and well, first of all, we lived about 2 blocks of each other for many. Well, at that time, I think it was 404 West St. Joe. The Andersons lived at 619 Townsend Street. My grandparent Rose lived at 506 South Capitol, and grandparents Olds lived at 720 South Washington. So it's a very close thing. Well, and also we did the one time that we spent quite a bit of time. He had this place in Charlevoix called Oldsmobile, which had a lot of bedrooms there, and there was always room for the family to come up there, and including guests, so we did spend some time up there in the late 20s, early in the 30s,
You'd go up there by automobile?
Oh yes. Well, of course, I can remember those drives up there because it took about 6 hours, and it was dirt road probably about from Clare on up, and that was back in the late 20s. And I'm sure it was a General Motors car, but I'm not sure just which one. But oh yeah, we had my father. Well, of course, we didn't go up with him. My father. I think my father had when they came out in the late 20s, a Rio Royale. They were a big old car. They were big, and well, yes, obviously at that stage of the game, Rio was the primary. Well, it was the car in Lansing, and also was more family involvement, of course. Ransom was chairman of the board. I don't know what his title was, but I assume he was at that time. And so his involvement with Oldsmobile at that time, of course, had been over for some time. But, so we had Rios or something like that. But I think they had some big car. They had some big car. I know my father. Family, both the Anderson and Rose, both had Cadillacs at one time, and so they did when they went into the bigger cars, they drove General Motors product. So,
well, do you remember any incidents about your grandfather? Did he play with you?
I don't know whether yes, up in Oldswood they had this That's the one I'm talking about in Charlevoix. They had this playground area up there, and he loved sports of any kind. And had bowling on the green, and rink toss and hoop and all that kind of thing. And so he participated in sports like that. I mean, I don't think it was so much on an individual basis as a group, but he loved to have people with him all the time. And he had, he liked younger people. So he had a lot of times friends of my mother and father and Bruce and Gladys Anderson up there. Spent quite a bit of time with them because they were the younger set, and they would do things that they also had their own friends, their own age, but they had up there. But they had them quite a bit of the time, and then there was always enough room for us kids to be up there if we happened to be free and go up there. And so I spent quite a bit of time in Charlevoix in those days, and it's quite changed from what it used to be. It was nice then. You would go over, and I remember they'd let you take it. We'd go over and later have a boat, and you'd go over to Charlevoix and get groceries. And you could dock. There would be no problem. And docking, now you gotta, I guess, apply a year in advance to get dock reservations so you can pull your boat up to. But these were just little. Of course, that's the way things were done, and those things sort of fun at the. I was there over.
So you really had a happy childhood with a lot of young people and relatives around.
Oh yeah, we had. I remember quite a bit in Tona. Now they had. There were two homes down there. Where there was one called Andromar, which I don't know the legal thing, but the Rose and the Andersons owned it. Oh. That was on the beach.
At Daytona?
At Daytona Beach. I guess eventually the whole thing was consolidated. In those days it was Seabreeze, Daytona, and Daytona Beach, but it's all consolidated and has been. And then he had, Grandfather Olds had his place over on the river, which is, well, that would be the Halifax. That's what they called the river there at Daytona. It isn't really a river, but that's what's called the Halifax River. So, and well, it's fairly wide at Daytona, and it'd be I don't know, it's a mile across or so. Yeah. Anyway, and the main part of town was over on the mainland, and this was called on the peninsula where Daytona Beach was, and we would see quite a bit of them down there. Of course, in those days, people didn't stay in Florida as long as they do now, and it's usually we were back back home. I don't know, probably. Actually, I think the season stopped. If you talk about seasons like down in Palm Beach on George Washington's birthday, that was the final thing. Well, the family stayed longer than that. But so I can remember, and sometimes one house would be open and not the other, and so we would spend time. One time I had an illness and I had to go to Florida to recuperate, and I spent probably a couple months at my grandparents' house. On the river, and at that time, the other house, I think, had been turned into a hotel. They added a wing of rooms on it, and they called it the Whitehall Hotel. It's still called the Whitehall. I don't know whether it's a hotel or a condominium, but we drove up there on the way home. We live in Florida in the wintertime, and we stopped in and just to look at it, see what was there on the property, but. Daytona is so changed that from back in the 20s, and it was a fascinating spot. That's when they had the races. Of course, I assume that's one reason that we started going there. He was, as you know, probably you're familiar, I'm sure, that he started racing his cars on Daytona Beach or Ormond Beach, I think. Yeah, well, Daytona and Ormond, I don't where they had the big races were in Daytona, but I guess. They have a museum there Museum of Speed, I think they call it. Unfortunately, it was closed on Monday, and we were there on Monday this time, so we couldn't go in and see it. But they have, so I can't give you much information on memorabilia or whatever they have there. But anyway, that was, of course, my great-grandparents lived down there, and the same house that he owned or lived in was originally his mother and father's, which he said they lived in California, and she had an illness, I believe, of some sort, and had to have warm weather. Well, California was a week's trip out there in those days, way back, and so he resettled them in Daytona Beach. And I think my guess is that plus the racing, probably, I'm just guessing now, is probably the reason why he settled on Daytona, and that's where we spent quite a bit. We'd go down there and go to school there during the winter on a sort of a tutor, take your own books down and tutoring schools, and they had those kind of things in those days where you. So we spent quite a bit of time down there, and sort of a second home. But so it's fun to go back once in a while. But it's too cold in the wintertime now, so we go a little further south.
Speaking of Florida, do you recall or do you know why Mr. Olds settled at Oldsmar? Why did he?
I do not know why he particularly, that I'm not familiar with. I know that now whether it had something to do with Mr. Thompson, who was originally up, and I think he looked after his legal work like Charles Eckert did for many, many years, who was still there when I was up, first came to the outside. No, he was up in, Charles Eckert was up in Lansing. He was president of the RL's company. And Jim Thompson was, I think, up here, and I've been speculating now for a while, looking after things for him. And then eventually he moved to Tampa. Now, whether he got involved in this Oldsmar, and they have changed, as probably maybe familiar, I think they changed the name to Tampa Shores for a while, but they changed the name. It's now called Oldsmar again. It's a little community up in the not too far from Tampa.
I visited that years ago to do some history interviewing with Olds retirees.
Well, that's what.
Saw them on to there on the beach.
Oh, I guess I haven't. Well, that's. Oh, good. Well, I have to. No, we used to get over there. We had a son living in Tampa, and he doesn't live there anymore. But when we did, we got over once and get through that way. I didn't realize there was that thing. So that.
Woody, tell me now. Your mother was Bernice.
But she called Bernice, or Bun, and and she's the youngest daughter. And Gladys, who 2 years, they're about roughly 2 years apart. So she was the younger daughter.
Brothers and sisters do you have?
Well, I had my older brother, Ed, died about 11 years ago, or was killed in an accident. And I have a sister, Bunny, who was 6 years younger than I am, and a brother, Doc. Well, he's called Doc, but Armin is his name, Armin Rowe. That is 9 years younger. So there were 4 in our family, siblings, and 2 in the Andersons.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and you were born in 1921,
right? Mm-hmm.
I see. Do you now, when you would go down with your parents to Florida, did you have extra help to take care of the children?
Well, they always had somebody. Well, we didn't. My mother looked after. When she with my 2 younger children, she had well, she wasn't really a nurse. She was sort of a companion, and well, she looked after the kids. I mean, name Mabel, was a real character and a lot of fun. Could tell great stories. Mabel Ames came from. A city just south of Hudson, Michigan. And she moved back there, and she was with us for quite a while, all the time. I went away to, of course, when they were younger, I went away to school when I was about 12 years old, and I went to Cranbrook School in Bloomfield Hills, and well, that was that was a prep school, and then I went on to Williams College after that. But
what was your interest in college?
Oh, well, I had general interest, and I think I eventually ended up with in economics, and then I took some graduate work in business at Columbia University. So that was my educational career, and of course it was sort of all, I was involved in the war, and so that split it up.
What did you do in the war? Your role?
Well, I was, well, it's a long story, but I guess I'll give it the most interesting, probably what you'd be interested in. I had an assignment in California, which was fun. I graduated, I was one of those 90-day wonders and got became a second lieutenant. And eventually ended up as a platoon leader, and I landed in Utah Beach and Normandy and went through all 5 campaigns at Normandy, Northern France, Ardennes, which is the Battle of the Bulge, and the Rhine, and Germany, and then came back. So was signed. So I got, but it was I have no objection to that experience at all. It was just one of those things you had to do. So.
Educational experience.
Well, yeah, he was there. I was over in.
And you're back in one piece.
Oh yeah, never occurred to me I'd get hurt. No, no way. So, in fact, I don't think I've ever been healthier in my life. No.
Did that worry your grandfather that he had sons in the service or grandsons in the service?
Well, I don't know. I was over there, and during that period, of course, I saw very little of them. They were either in Florida or someplace, or someplace that I wasn't. And of course, I was in service about not quite 3 years. And when I got home, I didn't get home probably more than twice during that period. And I saw my mother and father. And when I finally got home, they were all up in Charlevoix. They had cottages right next to each other. My mother and father had a cottage next to my grandparents, and so there was that was another close relationship that they had going there. And he was there at the time, of course. I remember
Where
that.
were these cottages located?
At the Belvedere Club, and yeah, it's still going strong up there, right as part of Charlevoix, and so, and then eventually that was sold, the cottage after they died, and then my mother, after my father died, eventually sold her cottage.
When did your father?
He passed away as 1962, so he was not a real old man when he, no, he was about 72. My mother died in 85, I think, yeah. That was, that'd be about it, I think. Yeah, 1985.
Well, then Gladys Senior passed away.
Oh, before that, well, I can't remember for sure, but I would guess early 80s. I can't remember the exact, I'd have to identify something, and I'm getting that stage where my memory slips me a little bit once in a while, too.
Where is Armand now?
He's here in Lansing. He still does some actuary. He became an actuary. In fact, he worked for Oldsmobile for a while, and yeah, I can't remember what accounting or some department, and he decided that like got his own, went back to school, and got his. Of course, you have to have a lot of math, and got his math, and then actually got his actuarial degree from the University of Michigan after he'd been out for a number of years working, doing things, and he basically, I think, retired from that, but I think he still has a couple insurance companies that he does actuarial work for.
And then you mentioned that Ed had passed away.
Yeah, he was killed in an automobile accident. That's all. He had been involved in many things. I think he had a Pontiac agency at one time in California, and then he'd been involved in some. I think he loved boats. I think in some way he was involved in the boating business too. But his main interest there for a number of years was he was in L.A., Chieftain Pontiac in L.A. That was his.
Then your sister is Bunny.
Yeah, Bunny. She lives here and in Lansing, and her family are here. In fact, she lives now and fixed it up in the house out on the river that Olds Anderson built.
Oh,
That's next to the old, the house that Gladys and Bruce Anderson built, and then my mother and father bought it from them. That's the one that burned down. It was the Grand Manor restaurant. Well, the hotel, I mean, the house next to it was built by Olds Anderson somewhere around 19, he can tell you better than I can, but I'm guessing around 39. And he then came in disrepair. He'd sold it. Well, his mother lived there for a while, and I assume bought it from him. And then she sold it, and Jim Brakeman owned it for a while, and eventually went into disrepair when Dr. Badgley bought it, and eventually my sister bought it and fixed it up, and currently is living there.
oh, it would have many memories too.
Oh yeah, it's the old it's Sanderson's home that he built next to his mother's house back in when he just got out of school, I guess.
Do you remember your grandfather having pets? Did he like animals?
Yeah, I think I heard him say, I don't think they had pets when I knew him, but I seems to me he referred to his childhood with pets. But I don't recall ever seeing. Uh, well, if you've got time, I've got it. So
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We have. See, your recollections are entirely different than anybody else's. They're unique with your experience. That's
Well, yeah. Everybody has. Obviously, you have different relationships, and
pioneer in the industry that's really changed the face of America. So that's why it's.
oh yeah, he was an individualist.
Yeah.
And I remember one incident. I'll tell it. Maybe it's told from a different perspective. But he had a back problem. They put him in this brace, and it was uncomfortable, so he had a brace made the way he wanted it. Of course, I don't know that it did any good, but anyway, it indicates the kind of a man he was, that he can do his own thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. When was that?
Well, this must have been in the 40s sometime, because he died 1950, and in fact, the last outing they had and the last pictures we have of them were at my wedding, and he died shortly thereafter, within a couple months, less than a couple months, because my grandmother died, because they died within almost a week of each other, or something like that, and maybe it was September, late August, or something like that, and I was married the 1st of June.
Ill?
Well, they've been ill off and on. My grandmother had been quite ill, and then she'd gotten better. And then all of a sudden, the grandfather started deteriorating, and I believe, maybe I'm wrong, I believe it was cancer that he eventually, because that all of a sudden takes over. And but he was quite proud that he'd never been operated on. He never wanted, and he never was. He lived to be 84, I guess, and never had nice, but he mentioned that several times that. So my grandmother had been in bad shape, and then she just—I can't remember whether she fell or what, but anyway, she just went downhill after he died. And very, very quickly, it was all over. That happens quite often. That once one goes, that the other goes. Quite
interesting. He's so proud of never had a surgery because he was so interested in getting the Sparrow Hospital started.
Oh, good. I see. I'm not familiar with that part of it at all. That he was involved in Sparrow Hospital. Yeah, of course that. And as far as I know, he never did have. But there again, I'm not privileged to know all the information on that. But
So you mentioned that your father had also taken the video or the motion picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was.
Father.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was.
Now Mr. Olds must have enjoyed being with a group and having his picture taken too.
Oh yeah, he was. I'm sure he must have been in it. Well, because I think most of these pictures were family or groups with friends and things like that. And of course, he would be involved. And back in the 20s, you were mentioning those other ones that were in. I'm sure a lot of them were down at Albemarle, because then when they sold Albemarle, as I understand, then he got property up in Charlevoix. So and the Albemarle eventually became Chateau Lavue, some kind of a club. It was a club. Yeah. Because I can remember my brother, older brother, and my cousin Peggy were given like memberships just because they were had been born there. Well, of course, the club went kaput, and eventually, I think it became the officers' club. There was a Navy air base down there on Grosse Ile. And I think they turned the home into an officers' club. Then I don't know what's happened to it since the war, whether it's just been somebody living there. Or I have no idea. I haven't been down there in many, many years. But
You must have taken many trips on different yachts too.
well, yeah, I spent some time on his boats, particularly up in a couple summers he spent. They did not open up their what they called Oldswood Lodge in Charlevoix, and they spent time on the yacht, which was good for my grandmother because everything was taken care of. She didn't have to do a thing. It was all taken care of because there was enough crew on board to do that. And they spent a couple summers up the Thousand Islands, and I can remember spending a couple weeks at a time or something on board ship in the Thousand Islands, which is a fascinating spot to. That's the headwaters of the St. Lawrence River.
Oh, yes.
And Kingston and.
You'd go up there.
Well, they go up there and I don't know. Well, we take a tender and fuss around, go buzzing around the islands and things like that. And I think one time we went up to. I think it got as far as Quebec. Went through the locks and went up to Montreal. Maybe it went to Quebec. I can't remember on the boat. But and then otherwise there was a lot. He always kept, if he had his summer place open in Charlevoix, of course the yacht was kept in Charlevoix around lake there. He had a boathouse, and he'd always keep a mini crew on it so that they could use it for day trips. And didn't always, if he was going to live on it for a period of time, of course he needed more help, so there would be more. But
how large a crew would you need?
I would guess probably around. I think it was set up for quite a few, but I don't think he had more than maybe. Well, it would be 8 or 9 or something like that on board. I'm guessing that if he was cruising, he might need a little bit more, but
he obviously enjoyed the water.
Oh yeah, I think that's one. Oh yeah, he loved. As he said, that was his recreation because he did not he didn't participate in sports that a lot of people do now, like golf and tennis and
Or bowling or?
well, he liked to bowl on the green. I mentioned that before, but that was just sort of an activity that he could do with other people and enjoy. And he liked to. Well, I can remember playing. He had a billiard room at 129 North Halifax, which is his Florida home. And he liked to play billiards, so or pool. He didn't play billiards; he played pool, which is there's a difference there, as you know. And well, yeah, you adequately as good as I was. I wasn't very good either, but I had a lot of fun at it. But and so he'd play billiards periodically, but he kept pretty. He liked keeping in touch with things, and he kept busy with his. Business stuff and letters coming down, and in the later years, when just before he passed on, I helped him some with when I would be like up north, and I'd go over to his cottage, was next door to my mother's and father's, and you know, maybe read to him a little bit. He couldn't read at that time; his eyes were getting bad. So he had trouble reading, and he might have a letter he might dictate or something, and so I just scribble it out on a piece of paper so he could sign it. So I did a little of that when I come up weekends before I was married there in the late 40s. So I got to see a little of him that way that you wouldn't normally get, but.
So he really conducted business even when he was on vacation. He was a working man. So
well, he always had. Yeah, he always had. He had a little up there. He didn't have it down in his Florida residence. He had what he called his office. It was a little library, I think, that he'd redone into an office, and he was always constantly on the phone or doing something. He was he kept in touch. He was, I think, right up to the very end until he got so sick he couldn't. He was interested in what was going on, and at that time I was at the office, so I sort of was a partial contact. Of course, he had his secretaries that he contacted and kept up with things, but he was interested. Yeah, he was right. He was interested in what's going on and his business, though he wasn't obviously directly connected with a business. It was his own personal business that he was conducting.
well, he did read a lot until his eyesight began to fail.
Yeah, I don't. Of course, I never saw how much he actually read himself. I assume I do not. That I cannot speak for. I just know that he would had. I know by the time I got up at the office there, his secretary would read his letters to him and things like that. Now I think his eyes were probably failing him, and that was 1940.
Still good.
Oh yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, as far as I know, that was. And well, he could see, but I mean, I think he had. It was getting at as young. I don't know what he had, but and it was not easy for him anyway.
Do you ever remember him without a mustache?
Seems to me he took it off one time because and I'm not sure I was even there when I heard the story, but he thought maybe he looked like Adolf Hitler or something. I don't know, but that's sort of vaguely the story I heard, and he shaved it off. And of course, when somebody does that, your lips all funny and stuff like that. If you had a mustache forever, well, it gets different. But I can't remember whether I actually saw him that way or heard the story, because basically he had a mustache most of the time that I recall. And the pictures too. I don't think I've seen a picture with him out a mustache.
Oh, either. So I just
Yeah.
wondered about that.
And so maybe this is just a story, and I never. But that.
He was left-handed.
I don't know. I always thought. No, I don't. That's a good question.
We have a photograph, and I could show it to you. You know how men's buttons.
Yeah, we button from left to right. You button right to left, and.
Well, you've got a vest on. and it's buttoned the way men button their coat. And he's seated at a desk, and he's got a pencil in his left hand, and this hand is kind of like this, as if he's thinking, which would kind of indicate he may have been left-handed.
Well, I guess I'm either not very observant or I don't know, but I just have assumed that he was right-handed. But
I think everybody did, but
yeah.
that picture makes me curious, and I just wondered if you had any
No, I never
indication or remembered any incident that would confirm one or the other.
I never had. No.
Did he have a shop where he still was experimenting on ideas and creating?
Well, not. I never saw it. So I think he was possibly whether earlier he went over to places like Hill Diesel that he was involved in, and you know, did things like that. I don't know, but that I'm not. I cannot answer that question. Not within my. He was. I must have been quite a bit young. In later years, I'm sure he did. I mean, there was no place for him to have it. So
Yeah.
he didn't have one in his home. He didn't have a home. I mean, a shop like some men might have in their own house where they can go down and tinker on it, as far as I know. So,
Obviously, he enjoyed music.
oh, I loved music, and he had player pianos. He had one in every place he had, I think, and we had one in Florida and one up in Charlevoix, and of course, and he even had in his home at 720 South Washington there in Lansing a pipe organ that was a player.
Oh, a player piece?
Well, a player polka, and it was a real pipe organ. I mean, the pipes worked. It wasn't just, it wasn't one of the new electronic thing, but, and you could put the rolls on and it played. And it was fascinating. I'd never seen one like that before.
Did he play any instrument?
I don't believe so, but he loved music. He just, it appealed to him, and but I do not believe that I never saw him play an instrument.
Any of his favorite songs?
Oh, well, there are all those old ones, you know, I'd have to think. Well, yeah, there things like Always and all those things that go back in that vintage, and they were on the player piano, of course. I don't recall whether that, because my main recollection was the player piano, and well, they did have classical because my family had a player piano too, and we had Rachmaninoff, and played all those pieces there like that. But I remember the more popular type of roles that he used to play.
Now, on this 727 South Washington, the third floor was the ballroom, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Remember any parties up there?
Well, the only party that I recall, I think there was a party that was given for Mose Anderson up there, and I believe, but I could be wrong on that, and I think they used that ballroom. But otherwise, no, I remember going up there, and there were storage rooms off of it, and singing it. But what we used basically there was that there was a music room, which he had built on over the garage, and that was probably the nicest room in the house, and that's where we met for Christmas presents and all this kind of thing, and that's where this organ that we were talking about was, and that was up halfway. You went up the landing and you got off there, and you went up further and you got on the second floor, and then you went up to the third floor. So it was about a 3/4 of a floor up, really, over the garage, and that's the room. So I don't think they used, maybe earlier when they used it back when it was first built. I think that was quite popular with homes having a third floor where there was a room where they could entertain and maybe have a little orchestra or something like that, and dances and things like that. But by the time I came around, I didn't sing any of it. But
you mentioned the garage. Is that the garage where this unusual
turntable? Oh yeah. Well, all the family had it. Well, we had one at my family had one, and there's one out at the that was Gladys Anderson installed so that they could put it on there and then back the cars off. And you'd turn it. That way you got you could get a lot more in the space. You could get around 5 cars in a garage or something. He could get 1, 2, 3, 4. And South Washington home by having a turntable.
How did that work?
Well, you just got it on, you just push it around. It was very simple. And my only bad experience was it, and this is a humorous thing on my side, but it gives, I learned a lesson. I used to come in and hit that turntable and push the wheels and put on the brakes and spin the car. And this time it was a little greasy, and I tunked my father's car with it. And after that, I didn't do it again. But that was in our own home, 619 Townsend Street. But if you kept them in working order, it was very simple to. They were balanced so that you could easily just you'd come in, then you just get out and push the car around to where you wanted to back it off, and then you backed it off.
Well, now let me see. I don't have a very good mental picture of this. You would head into.
You go right into the door. In other words, if you went straight, you'd go into a wall. Well, there was, in his case. Now, then there was this turntable, and you left the car on the turntable.
Okay.
You got out, you pushed it, and there were 3 stalls over here on the right. And you would, whatever stall you wanted to put this particular car in, you moved it, and then you'd back it off the turntable into the stall that you were going to place the car.
The turntable actually.
Ooh. Oh yeah, but you did it manually. You did it manually. Yeah, you just turned it around until you got it and backed it off. So you wouldn't. You could turn it and go forward, but it was easier to back it off. And
Yes.
then it was easy, but you could do it either way. It's just a matter you turned it so you could go into that slot. And it worked out, and that way you got maximum use out of the space. And
Was that his own device?
no, this was bought. I'm sure these turntables you could buy.
I see.
You bought because there again. I'm not sure, but I just assumed because when my mother put one in, I think it was about mother and father in 1932 or 3, and though obviously I was not overly concerned with what goes on and how things are done, I just know what happened. But
You had
yeah, and the Andersons had one, and it's just a way of utilizing the space better. And I haven't seen too many of them in private homes, but there was all 3 of us families had it at one time or another.
Did your grandfather have a sense of humor? What amused him?
Yeah, he had a sense of humor. Things he was serious, but I would say he had I can't actually use an example, but things amused him, and he basically enjoyed life. There's no question about it, and he could see the funny side of well, I think, Chris, I think that's important with everybody. I mean, sense of humor is one of the most important things we have. We don't have that, it's pretty hard to get along. But
he wasn't really deaf on anyone who smoked, was he?
No, he wasn't deaf on it. He did not smoke, and he didn't approve of it. I'll put it that way. But he didn't. No, we smoked. I smoked, and I think the only one he offered a speedboat to anybody in the family that didn't smoke until they're 21. Well, none of the Rose managed to get that. I think Old Anderson did. He didn't get. He took something else instead of that, but he got the incentive was there, and so I mean, he wasn't death on it. He just didn't think it was, and he knew. I mean, his family all smoked. Both of his daughters smoked, and son-in-law smoked, and of course those days it was acceptable, and and so and they smoked in his presence, and so he was a good sport about it. I guess you have to put it that way, even though he didn't himself, did not. He, no, he didn't. Well, first of all, my grandmother was definitely against alcohol. She was a WCTU person, very, very strict. And he didn't, he always said that he did not approve of drinking because of what he saw in the plants. That his men would spend all their money and get drunk, and then the family wouldn't have any money, and this that too much money was utilized up on alcohol when it should be going into other things, and so that's what he said. That he at the very end, his doctor thought he ought to have a for his heart, a little liquor. I mean, a small glass of. And I think an interesting sidelight to this thing is when he got to that stage, and well, they probably like bourbon because he liked sweet things, and so bourbon's a sweeter drink. And he said, I guess he bought a bottle and brought it home, and my grandmother took the label off and put R.E.'s medicine on it.
Oh.
That's the story. I didn't see that either, but that's the story. But he really had a drink for medicinal purposes, and I think it made him feel better. So I think he enjoyed it. But that was at the very end, and the family did not drink in front of him. Oh, at the end, they did a little bit, and but my grandmother was so he wouldn't have been as opposed, I think, to alcohol if it hadn't been for my grandmother, who was definitely she was a very religious person, and that was her particular. Was a Baptist, and I guess they don't approve too much of.
What kind of personality did Meta have?
Well, she was really a very considerate person. I mean, she's at the end. As an example, when she wasn't in the best of health, if she thought somebody ought to have a chair, she'd take a heavy chair and push it up for them, and things like that. She was a very a thoughtful woman, and our relationship was always just fine. I mean, I never did a great deal, but she was always there, and she was grandmother, and we got along fine. But and I think that would be her greatest asset was her thoughtfulness and consideration for other people. She very, very much so.
She obviously had quite a bit of influence over your grandfather.
Well, I guess so, yes. I would assume that at least I think, of course, as far as we're talking about the alcohol part of it, it wasn't hard to him because he definitely felt, I'm sure, as I said before, that he'd seen drunkenness and stuff in the factories and things like that he disapproved of, and as we all disapprove of it. A little social drinking never hurts you, doesn't hurt you, but if you have the beliefs, you don't care. But so I don't think it was very hard for him to, and I don't know whether he had ever, my guess is he probably never drank before anyway. I don't, as far as I know, he didn't drink except to have it for municipal purposes at the very, R.E.'s medicine. And she always referred to him as R.E. That was her,
yeah, that was her.
Yeah, she was always,
so the two of them together, she would call him
R.E., yeah.
That's interesting. What did he call her?
Oh, Meta. Or once in a while, if he was referring to somebody else, he'd call him Mrs. R.E. or something like that. But I think between the two of them, it was Meta and R.E. as far as I could. But when he referred to her, a lot of times it was his initials and Mrs. R.E.
Did you go to any functions at the Rio Clubhouse as a family group?
No, the only functions at the Rio Clubhouse, I think, DeMolay, I think, used to meet there, way back there, and I think there was though I was not a member of that group, I had, because I was away at school, but I would come back and there would be a party or something like that, and I believe it was held at the Rio Clubhouse. A lot of those functions like that were in those days, and but never as a family, no, I was never involved in anything of that nature.
Were you aware of any concerns your grandfather had when the management of Rio began to seem different than when he had was the authority there?
Well, not really. Not anything that was directly connected with him. I mean, what little I got was probably gossip and hearsay in the family, but no. And there again, I was away. As I said, I went away to school when I was 12, and I never really came back for set vacations and things like that. And so, that a lot of that was happening, I think, in the 30s. And also I was fairly young. You know, when you're in a early teens, you don't get all excited about that kind of got other problems you're worrying about. But so no, I was not, and the little I know about what happened is strictly from reading things later. And these problems with, I guess, Mr. Scott. There was a few things, and well, my grandfather Rowe was originally, I think he was the first secretary of the Real Motor Car Company. And then he went back to the bank. He decided he didn't want to, he'd rather be a banker than he would be in manufacturing.
I see. Well, obviously, he and Mr. Olds were good friends.
Oh yeah, as I mentioned before, they had they were social friends, the Olds and the Rose, and my well, I think my mother and father knew each other long before they were married, and there were, of course, at that stage there was quite a different. My father was 5 years older than my mother, and of course, in the teens, that made he was a college, well, she was still going to high school or something. So that was, but they were close friends, and so it worked. It made it nice for us and family when we had family gatherings because they weren't outside in-laws brought in. They were actually good friends as well as part of the family. So and that worked out for the Rose. It happened to be the Andersons, Bruce Anderson's family lived in Colorado. So that was, they weren't here, Lansing, but both of my grandparents lived right here. They say only a couple blocks away from each other. So.
Well, Woody, can you think of anything else like you'd like to share about your family, your relationship to Ransom Olds?
Well, I really can't add, I don't think, too much. It was, as I say, it was a fine relationship as far as I can recall. And when he passed on in 1950, and that was just when I was sort of, getting going. And but I had an opportunity to see a little of him in the business light for a few years in the late 40s before he died. Because I enjoyed that relationship, and we had fun. I did leave the company. I thought, well, I better go out and see what I can do. And well, it worked out that what I was going to do didn't materialize, and he was all for it. He gave me letters of introduction and everything. He said, "But why don't you come back eventually?" Oh, well, it worked out that I did come back before he died, and we got along just fine. And I think I helped him a little bit at the end there because I was around. I was at least family that was could assist him in some things. Or well, no, I don't feel there's anything I can directly add to your.
Well, you certainly have provided an insight in a good many areas that are different from anybody else.
Thank you. I hope so anyway.
I really appreciate your mentioning these movies that you have, the 16mm movies. If you run onto them and would like to share them, we can have GM make them into videos like we did Olds Anderson's. And then you
Case full of still pictures. I don't know which ones. I haven't even. Came from my mother's house that go way back. I mean, I'm talking about in the 20s and the 30s and stuff like that. And I'll someday get around to, looking those over.
Yeah.
And if you are interested, and I find something that pertains to, the Olses, then
Yeah.
I think that's what you're basically interested in. You've had enough of the family after all,
Yeah.
so you want to just pertain to mainly my grandfather, but maybe a little bit my grandmother if there's any
Yes.
connection between them.
Photographs would be especially interested, even printed matter that would give some historical facts that we could preserve in the future, because his role was so great in the automobile industry, and we don't want to lose that.
Okay, we will.
A lot of
Your name.
but we should certainly have all we is available about our founder.
Yeah, I'll try to get as much information as I can. If I can get something, I would be very happy to call you and talk to you about it.
Good. You get a moment, there's no hurry. And then do you use the 1/2 inch or the 3/4 inch video?
Well, whatever the regular video is.
Use the 1/2 inch.
Okay, that would be it. All I got is a VCR, and that's whatever you get down at the, yeah. Okay, probably the same thing that you did for Olds. Yeah, it's the standard video that you just stick in the slot and,
Okay. Yes, we can do that. We'd be very happy to do that.
well, we'll get at it and see what we can find.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you for signing the agreement. We really appreciate that.
Well, it's nice to be here. And, thank you for asking me. I enjoyed talking to you, and it's been very, yeah.
Now we're looking forward to Oldsmobile's 100th.
I know. Yeah.
So I've often thought it's too bad your grandfather couldn't have lived until the birth date of the company that he had founded. I think he passed away
Sometime in August or something.
August 26th.
Was that it? It was in 1950. That's all I remember.
I think it was after. That's right. I believe he did pass the birth date of his company.
What is the actual birth date of the company?
21st.
The 21st. All right.
I have to check the date just when Mr. Olds passed away, but they were very close.
Yeah.
They were very.
I guess
close.
I'm not.
Well, thank you.
Well, okay, fine. Well.